everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to do the 20 Bookish questions tag, and I was tagged by Hugo over at Hugo Reads. I will definitely link his channel and the video where he does this tag down below. He is a fellow Belgian booktuber, so definitely check out his channel. Now, I don't think that this tag needs any more introduction. The title pretty much says it all. It's 20 questions about the books that I've read. And since 20 questions is quite a lot for the average tag, I'm not going to make this video any longer than it needs to be and jump straight into the first question. And that is, how many books is too many in a series? Now, this is quite a difficult question to answer because it depends on the series. Some series really drag out, but some series really do need the amount of books that are in there. However, I think that on average, more than 5 to 6 books is a lot, and then you really need to have a reason why the story needs to be that long. And I also think that most series that are longer than that do drag, unless, for instance, if you follow a certain character and they have one story in each book with a very clear beginning and ending. I haven't read the Dresden Files, but from what I've gathered, that's a little bit how that series is built up. That's something different. But if you really have an ongoing story and it's more than 6 books, for me it usually drags. Now, there are some things that an author can do that make me want to read a longer series. For example, The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, that you can see here behind me. That's a series of 16 books in total, but it is cut down into smaller pieces, so it's built up of different trilogies that have an overarching story, but each trilogy has a very clear beginning and ending. So that way I can definitely enjoy a longer series. For example, you also have the Witcher series, which is 8 books in total, because you have 2 short story collections, then you have 5 books in the main series, and then you have a prologue, this one, that I still need to read. That's something different. Even though it's a longer series, it feels like it's cut down in more manageable parts. So I would say 5 to 6 books, unless something really special is going on and you need more books to tell your story. The next question is, how do you feel about cliffhangers? Now, I don't like cliffhangers in general. I don't like cliffhangers at the end of a book. I especially don't like cliffhangers at the end of a series. For example, the First Law trilogy, I didn't really like the ending of that one because there were too many loose ends that I would have liked to see tied up. I'm not saying that it needs to be a positive ending, but I need to have some closure. And so especially at the end of a series, I hate cliffhangers. I hate that open ending. At the end of a book in a series or in a trilogy, I usually don't like that either, because it's fine if you want to binge an entire series, but on the other hand, a lot of authors want you to buy the books even if the series isn't finished yet. And then it can really be annoying if you read the second book in a series, it ends on a huge cliffhanger and the third one isn't out yet. So in general, I don't like that. The only exception is at the end of a chapter. I like a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter because that immediately propels me into the next chapter and that makes me read a book faster. So in general, that's something that I do like, but at the end of a book or at the end of a series, no cliffhangers, please. Then we have hardcopy or paperback. Now, in general, I like hardcovers more. I just like how they look on a shelf, and that's basically the number one priority that I have. And in general, I don't mind reading them either, because a lot of people don't really like dust jackets, but I do, because when I take off the dust jacket and I just read the book, I don't really care if I break the spine or anything like that, because you're not going to see it when I put the dust jacket on again. So I actually quite enjoy that. I also like dust jackets more than when the art is printed on the bare book, which is something that in Dutch often happens. And I know that a lot of people from other countries actually really do enjoy that. But that way, if you do damage the book while reading it, you see it a little bit more easy. I think that my least favorite edition of a book is definitely the mass market paperback, because that's a pain in the ass to read in general, even though because they're so cheap, of course that's the clear advantage. But in terms of reading enjoyment, those are the ones that I like least of all. The ones that I like most of all for reading enjoyment are probably the floppy paperbacks, and I also do like how they look, but still, if it's purely for the aesthetic, I like hardcovers the most. Then I will talk about my favorite book, because that is the next question. And of course, everybody knows that is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. This is the first one in the Seven Waters series. I have a non-spoiler review for the original trilogy that I will link down below. It's a fairy tale retelling. It's forest, it's magic, it's beautiful. If you haven't heard me talk about this one already, then I do strongly suggest that you look at the review. Then from favorite book, we jump to least favorite books, and I have 2 here because I did really go with books that I've read into completion. And the first one that I have here is The Half-Drowned King by Linnea Hartsucker. This one is the first book that I've read this year. I had very high expectations, and I will link all the wrap-ups down below or in the cards if I have enough space. But it's an historical fiction Viking retelling of the first king of Scotland, Norway. And I just didn't like it. I think that this one was also lacking in quality in terms of writing style and just in general. The story wasn't good, the characters felt pretty flat to me, and then the writing style was also very annoying. Another one that I recently read was The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrows. For this one I actually didn't have the highest expectations, but I still went in pretty hopeful. I do think that this one is written beautifully, so in terms of quality this is definitely the better one of the two, but it just never really gripped me, and at the end I was just reading it to finish, which is never a good sign, I suppose. So these are definitely the two least favorite books that I've read this year. The next question is love triangles, yes or no? And I'd say no. I think that love triangles is one of the few prompts that I think you can almost never execute well, just because of what the prompt is about. You're going to have two people and you have your main character that needs to choose. So the author often already tells you from the beginning, makes it really clear which one is the better option. So that leaves you basically annoyed with the main character that she can't see that. Or if it's done well, you have two pretty good options, but then it's just very difficult to choose. So I, in general, don't like that. You always have somebody whose feelings get hurt. And yeah, that's just not the thing that I'm looking for. If I'm looking for a good romance, I want a good romance. I want something fluffy, I want something happy, and not have those tensions there. I do think that one book where a love triangle is done pretty well is Fox Mask by Juliette Merlier, of course, because here it goes a little bit back and forth, but at the end you're still happy with who she ends up with. But still, yeah, I think that this is probably one of my least favorite prompts of all time, so no love triangles, please. The seventh question is, what is the most recent book that you couldn't finish? And I think that this is the one. It is Hunter's Oath by Michelle West, which is the first book in the Sacred Hunt duology by her. And I actually still have the bookmark in, so I got 76 pages far before I just stopped reading, and after a month I thought, okay, it's not going to happen, just put it back on your shelves. I still plan to read this one, but I just had very different expectations of what this was going to be. This was actually on my 5-star predictions list, so that's pretty sad. But yeah, I thought that this was going to be about animal companions with forest nature and stuff like that, and it definitely is in there as well. But on the other hand, you also have time travel. This is basically a duology, but it's the beginning of a bigger series, and I didn't know all of that. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with this one. Well, I was disappointed a lot, basically. And I still plan to pick it up because what I've heard since is that this is the weakest of her works, but that it is still best to begin with this one before you start with her bigger series, which is a lot better. Still, I want to look into if that bigger series also has time travel, because then it might just not be for me, and then this one will probably stay a DNF, unfortunately. The next question is the book that I am currently reading, and I have two books here. The first one is Skullthorn by Brian Staveley. This is standalone in his bigger series. The first trilogy is The Chronicle of the Unhung Throne, which is one of my favorite grimdark series in general. And since his new book, which is the beginning of a second trilogy that takes place a couple of years after the original one, comes out in July, and I have already pre-ordered it, I thought that it was time to finally read this one, this small standalone. It's basically 300 pages, and I must say I was a little bit disappointed with this one. I'm currently 136 pages of 300 pages in, so almost halfway, and it starts picking up a little bit, but still, I think that my hopes were just too high, because I love the original trilogy. I've heard that this one was even better. I do not agree with that at this point. This might change, but just in general, I like the characters of the original trilogy more, and as a character-driven reader, of course, that's going to be important, but still, my hopes are still high that I'm going to like it a little bit more in the second part, because it is ramping up a little bit already. And then the other one that I am reading is, I'm listening through this one on audiobook, and that is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. You're not going to see a lot here. So audiobook, and I am 100 pages in. I'm liking this one. I have a feeling that I won't like this one as much as The Poppy War, because I actually liked the first half of that book also quite a lot with the school-like setting, and I know that a lot of people liked the second half more. I think that I was a little bit mixed, and I actually liked those two different settings, while here, of course, it's all the second half of the first book, and I'm still enjoying it, but I'm quite interested to see what's going to happen, because this is definitely a thick one. I still have almost 600 pages to go. So yeah, I do think that this one I will like a lot as well. Then the question is, what is the last book that you recommended to someone? And this is a very difficult one, because if you're on BookTube, you probably recommend a book every day, multiple times. But I think that the last one that I recommended offline is Malice. I recommended this one to a colleague of mine when she asked what I was reading at the moment, and I said I just finished Malice, I really liked it. So if you're looking for something like this with a lot of action, with a lot of different POVs, then definitely pick this one up. And I think if we're looking at online recommendations, the ones that I recommend the most, or that I want to recommend the most, is definitely 12 Kings by Bradley P. Bolio, which is the first one in a longer series, and I think that the last one comes out in July, or at least maybe it already has come out. Anyway, this is a 6-book long series, and it's definitely going to be concluded this year. And then the other one that I really like and like to recommend is Raise the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. Now, these are definitely not my 2 favorite books of all time, but these are the ones that I think are underappreciated in general. Of course, I love Robin Hobb, but everybody knows about that. Of course, I love The Witcher, but everybody knows about those books. And then Brandon Sanderson is a little bit overhyped in my opinion. So I try to recommend books that other people might not have heard of and that are still very good. So those 2 are probably the ones that I like to recommend the most to fantasy readers in general. Then the next 2 questions are, what is the oldest book that you've read and what is the newest book that you've read based on publication date? And the oldest book is definitely The Hobbit by Tolkien, so everybody knows about this one, and I think that it came out before the 1940s, 1937 maybe, so this is definitely an older book. I think that it was originally published as a children's book, or at least that's how Tolkien envisioned it, if I'm not mistaken. So I read the Dutch edition. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but I liked it. I still really wasn't in love with it. It was a fine read. I could definitely tell that it was an older book. Maybe that had something to do with it as well. But still, I'm glad that I've read it, because at least this one I could get through. The Lord of the Rings, I couldn't. And then the newest book that I've read based on publication date is Sister Song by Lucy Holland. This one came out in April of this year. It's a standalone. It's a retelling of a murder ballad of the Cross sisters. And I actually really enjoyed this one. It had some bumpy parts in the book, but in general I do think that this is worth picking up, especially because it's a standalone. If you like nature magic and stuff like that, then this is definitely one to pick up. So with this one, again, I'm quite happy that I read it. The next question is, who is your favorite author? And I actually have 2. Robin Hobb, of course, is one of my favorite authors. Even though I haven't read all of her works yet, I, at this point in time, read 8 books. I enjoyed almost all of them except for one. And I just think that she is a very reliable author. You know that all of her works are going to be very enjoyable to read with a lot of quality, and especially for character-driven readers, I think that her Fitz series In the Realm of the Elderlings is probably one of the best series that you can pick up in that part of fantasy. So she's definitely one of my favorite authors. The other one is Juliette Marillier. And even though I think that Hobb is the most skilled author of the 2, Juliette Marillier just has something that I really enjoy. She has that whimsical writing style that I love. She uses a lot of fairy tales as inspiration, but also real history. And then usually time eras or time periods that I really enjoy as well. Her magic is always connected to nature, and the romances that she writes are one of the best that I truly enjoy. So I think that Hobb has something that I really enjoy, and besides that, she's just a really good author. But then Juliette Marillier just hits a nerve with me that every book that she's going to write might differ in quality, and she might have some issues in those books, but I just don't mind because everything else fits perfectly to what I personally enjoy. The next question is, borrowing books or buying books? Now, if you've seen my book hauls, if you've seen the bookshelves behind me, then you definitely know that I like buying books. I think that that's a hobby that's definitely connected to reading books, but it's also its own thing. If you like buying things and you like having a collection, then you want to have the books in your own hands and you want to own them. So that's definitely the case with me. I do borrow books in the term of audiobooks. I borrow all of my audiobooks through a subscription, but I most of the time also own the books physically. So it doesn't really count as borrowing, I suppose. Why I want to have them, I don't know. One of the things is, of course, because I like looking at them. The other one is that somehow I'm afraid that I will forget that I've read them, which is a little bit silly, but still. I do think that in 2022 I want to buy a little bit less because I want to read the books that I already own as a priority, but then I will still not start borrowing books that I don't own, because that feels a little bit silly. I have all of these books here behind me. I actually spent money on these books. Then I am going to prioritize these over books that I can find in the library. And in any case, if you live in Belgium and you don't live in any of the bigger cities, finding an English book in your library, well, good luck. Then question 14 is a book that you dislike that everyone else seems to love. Now, I already talked about The Lord of the Rings, and I do think that most people really love that series, even though a couple of people I have heard saying that they do think that the writing style is a little bit difficult to get through. So I'm definitely not the only one in that aspect. But another one that I dislike, that most people do like, and that is one of my favorite authors actually, is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. So this is the first one in the Life Ship Traders trilogy. Now, first of all, I must say that as a character-driven reader, I know that a lot of people say that the Life Ship Traders trilogy is the best one in the realm of the Elderlings. I do not agree. I like the stories that revolve around Fitz a lot more. But still, in the end, I really enjoyed the Life Ship Traders trilogy. And I think that the second and the third book are, in general, just one of the best books that I've read. But Ship of Magic just didn't start off on the right foot for me. Something happened here. So it's definitely multi-POV to start. And in the beginning, I just didn't know where the story was going to go. But on the same hand, I also didn't really see why I should feel invested in these characters. I think upon a reread, I will love this one a lot more. But I just think that that maybe wasn't handled in the best way. You either need to give me what the story is about, and because this is multiple POV and you start in different parts, these POVs are not connected for the most part with each other in the beginning. So the story goes very slowly. And it takes a while before these different POVs start getting connected to each other. But then if I feel invested in any of those, that would help. But I do think that in the beginning, all of the main characters are not really likable, except Winthrop. So yeah, I definitely had some issues with this one. And to be of one of my favorite authors, that's quite surprising, I guess. Then we have Bookmarks or Dog Ears. And I don't even understand why that's a question. Would anybody really prefer Dog Ears? I wouldn't do it, but I can understand that if you're somewhere and you don't have anything to put in between your books, that you might dog ear it, even though I think that you could remember the number of the page where you are on, or you could maybe take a picture with your cell phone or anything that you can just go home and then put some paper in between the pages. So maybe in that case that you don't have any other options, I understand, but most of us have something lying around, even if it's just a receipt. Put that between the book. Why would you dog ear it? Also, I don't think that that's the easiest way to find your page again, because I can definitely imagine having a dog ear. It might take a while to find it back. So it's also just inefficient in general. Just use bookmarks. If you buy books, you get a lot of free bookmarks, especially from Book Depository, but you don't even have to use a bookmark. Just use something, a piece of paper, a scrap, something that you put between your books instead of damaging the books. Of course, it's your book, you do whatever you want, but I don't even understand why you would do it. The next question is a book that you can always reread. Now, in general, I don't do rereads. I have too many books on my TBR that I'm not going to spend time on a reread. But one that I do reread quite a lot is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. I have already talked about this. This is my favorite book of all time. Another book or series that I see myself rereading is once I've finished The Realm of the Elderlings, I am going to jump into it straight away, because it's just something that I couldn't let go, I suppose. So that's one that I do plan to reread. And then another one that I plan to reread is Red Rising by Pierce Brown, because I didn't like it when I first read it, but then the second and the third one in the trilogy I enjoyed a lot. So I do think if I reread this one again, that maybe I will have a different feeling towards it. So in general, I don't do rereads, but then for some of those where I think that my feelings will be completely different afterwards, it's something that I do want to do. One of the last questions already is, do you listen to music while you read a book? And no, I do not. There are some instances that I can understand if you do that. For example, Hugo over at Hugo Reads, when he answered this question, he said that he trained himself to do this so he can block out the noise of his neighbors when he's listening in or when he's reading his book in the yard. So I can definitely see that you want to do that, because music is then better than background noises of kids and stuff like that. But if I can choose, I want to have complete quiet in my home, up to the point that when I am reading and my husband sits beside me and he is watching videos over on his phone, then I want him to use earphones, because otherwise I will not be able to concentrate on my book. The only thing that I can live with is if I'm outside and I hear nature noises. That's something that I can live with. But music, I would never choose to listen to music while I'm reading. It's also just the case with me that I can only pay attention to one thing. When I'm listening to an audiobook and I'm driving and I get to a busy intersection or something like that, I always have to rewind because I will pay attention on the road and then not be able to listen anymore. So one thing at a time, please, either listening to music or reading a book. The next question is one POV or multiple POVs. Now again here, I don't have a clear dislike for one of the two, but if I can choose, I think that my favorite books are always the one with one POV. It's the case for Daughter of the Forest and most of Juliette Merlier's books. It's also the case for The Realm of the Everlings that are centered around Fitz. So in general, I do like that a little bit more because it gives you more time in that character's head and to feel invested in the character. However, there are definitely some multi-POV stories that I enjoyed as well and that I think can elevate the story also, especially if the fantasy world needs it, because sometimes with fantasy books, multiple POVs are definitely a strong suit. Also, the way that it's handled. For example, in 12 Kings by Bradley P. Bolio, for example, you start with one POV, you feel invested in her, and then other POVs come trickling in and they are always connected to the first one that you already know. So in that case, the other POVs actually give you more information about that person that you were already invested in. So in that case, I do also like that approach, but having multiple POVs from the start of a story, it's also a little bit jarring. So that's why I have sometimes a problem with that, and I think that one POV is just in general the safer option and you can do no wrong with that. With multiple POVs, you definitely can. And then the last real question is, do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Definitely over multiple days. And I think that something that has to do with this as well, of course, is that I read fantasy. The average fantasy book is 500 pages. And I can see if you have a book that's maybe 100 or 150 pages, that you just read it in one go. Because if you read 100 pages a day, which is average for a lot of booktubers, not average in general, but that's something that I can see people do. And then you only have maybe 50 or 60 pages, you're already towards the end of the story, you want to know where it ends, then I can definitely see that you also finish the home stretch. However, if you have 500 pages to read, in general, I think that I maybe read 50 pages an hour, so that would mean I have to read 10 hours in one go. First of all, that's not possible if you have to go to work like me or if you have other things to do. On the other hand, it also doesn't seem like a lot of fun. I do like to read in bigger parts or just have bigger chunks of time to read in one go, such as 2 hours with small breaks in between, because that can get you really invested in a book. In contrast to reading maybe 15 minutes, by the time that you're back invested in the story, you have to quit again. So that's something that I do like to do, but still, then I may have finished 100 pages, which is 1/5 of the average fantasy books. So definitely multiple days for one book, just because I'm not able to finish a book in one day. And then the last question is, who do you want to tag? Now, I do have 3 people in mind because I know that they do tags and really love doing them. So maybe with this one, they have a little bit more options on which one they want to do next. And those people are Hey Y'all Listen Up, Beauty Chemcam, and The Ramblin' Reader. Now, of course, if I haven't tagged you here, but you still want to do the tag, consider yourself tagged. I love hearing people answer these questions, and then let me know in the comments down below that you are going to do this tag so I can look forward to your video. So those were my answers for this tag. Please let me know what you thought about these. Do you have some thoughts on my answers? Do you agree or do you disagree? And also let me know just in general if you have some questions that you want to share your answer with as well. Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I hope that you enjoyed the video and see you next time. Bye!